The big story that was broken first on Times Now and forced all the other channels to follow suit. It's about a documentary by the British Broadcasting Corporation whose first part was released on the 17th of January and has been called out from London to New Delhi as a hatchet job and agenda-driven propaganda. The reason? The documentary has called India the Modi question, and it claims to examine the role of the then Gujarat Chief Minister in the Gujarat riots. The documentary, in addition to speaking to journalists in India and the UK, also claims to have access to a secret report that was prepared by the British Foreign Office in 2002. Based on a government cable, the documentary says that this Foreign Office report calls the 2002 Gujarat riots ethnic cleansing and blames Prime Minister Modi, who was then the Chief Minister, squarely for this so-called ethnic cleansing. Now, in the first government reaction to this documentary, the MEA has called it nothing more than a motivated hatchet job.
We think this is a propaganda piece designed to push a particular discredited narrative. The bias, a lack of objectivity, and frankly a continuing colonial mindset is blatantly visible. If anything, this film or documentary is a reflection on the agency and individuals that are peddling this narrative again. It makes us wonder whether about the purpose of this exercise and the agenda behind it. And frankly, we do not wish to dignify such efforts.
Now, the MEA has said that this film, which has since been taken off YouTube, is propaganda, comes from a discredited and colonial mindset and has no objectivity, but is only trying to push a narrative. But that is not all. There are voices being raised against the film all the way from London right here in India. There was an effort to try and raise documentary in the UK Parliament as an example of genocide against Muslims in India, only to be summarily shot down by the UK Prime Minister. Listen.
Mr. Speaker, last night the BBC revealed the Foreign Office knew the extent of Narendra Modi's involvement in the Gujarat massacre that paved the way for the persecution of Muslims and other minorities we see in India today, with senior diplomats reporting that the massacre could not have taken place without a climate of impunity created by Modi, and that he was, in the FCO's own words, directly responsible for this violence. Given that hundreds were brutally killed and that families across India and the world, including here in the UK, are still without justice, does the Prime Minister agree with his diplomats in the Foreign Office that Modi was directly responsible? And just what more does the Foreign Office know of his involvement in this grave act of ethnic cleansing?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the UK government's position on this has been clear and long-standing and hasn't changed. Of course, we don't tolerate persecution where it appears anywhere, but I'm not sure I agree at all with the characterisation that the honourable gentleman has put forward.
Indian expats in London as well hit the streets saying that the documentary is full of half-truths and lies and is nothing more than an effort to try and create communal fissures in India and also try to create an atmosphere of distrust in order to taint the present Prime Minister. However, the opposition in India has latched on to what has been described as discredited to say that the BJP is trying to engage lobby to silence a piece of investigative journalism.
We've been told, we've been seeing on social media that there is a documentary. We don't know the contents of the documentary. I'm sure Mr. Modi knows the contents. And we are told that there are lobbies hired by this government or appointed by this government to try and stop this film.
Without supporting the BBC article in toto, intolerance has increased, the social and communal divide has increased, the BJP is trying to foster communal disharmony for their political gains. It's a thing to be taken into consideration that Indians were known to be tolerant. Their impression and reputation in international community in 2024, BJP is going to be out of power, and that will put this kind of story to rest.
So now you've heard all of these political reactions. Now listen to people who actually know. Among those who have been quoted in the documentary, who have been interviewed in the documentary, is BJP leader Swapan Das Gupta. He, in fact, has spoken exclusively to Times Now to call out the British Broadcasting Corporation, even alleging that only parts of what he actually said have been included in order to create a narrative.
Let me first explain one thing to you, that when I was told about this documentary, I was told there was going to be a film being made. They were making a documentary on India under Modi, where they would also look, incidentally, where it was also look at his relationship with the 2002 Gujarat riots. Now, as things turn out, this was essentially, the first part was essentially only about the 2002 riots, which certainly was not, I didn't feel that was part of the original idea. Now, it was a very fairly exhaustive interview which they took of me. I think it went on for about an hour, which covered various things about what present, the CAA, Article 370, etc., a lot of them. Maybe some of those will be incorporated in subsequent episodes. Now, what I felt about my interventions on the Gujarat riots was that, they were taken in as a sort of pro forma of another view. It was just a sort of pro forma, and here there are some people who have another view, so a couple of sentences from me were just sort of incorporated in that. Well, the main thrust of the argument was that, Modi is guilty, etc., That was their thing. I mean, I get the feeling it was a hatchet job which they were trying.
This documentary is a very short-sighted, has no vision. It doesn't look at a bigger picture. This event took place 20 years ago. Indian judiciary tried, tested everything, and Mr. Modi was exonerated. Now he is the most powerful prime minister and the most respected prime minister in the world. What do? They cannot rise above him. So what they do, they try to dig some dirt and to throw mud at him. But this is not going to affect India or Prime Minister Modi.
Joining us now, Sushil Pandit activist, Rashmi Samant, former student union president at Oxford University and human rights activist, Tausifur Rahman, political analyst, and Dr. Suman Swiraman, political analyst. I want to start with you, Sushil Pandit, because it's being said that this is a great piece of investigative journalism. What is the problem?
What have they investigated? Is there any new fact that they've brought out? Is there any new truth that they claim to have invented? I mean, this is incredible. They are recycling, rehashing old allegations, old concoctions, and trying to recreate, almost bring alive the long dead and buried ghost of Gujarat riots in order to be a player in our domestic politics.
Trying to interfere in domestic politics.
That is the primary reason. BBC.
Life in 2002 Gujarat riot.
Yes.
You have lost no one. Have you lost anyone?
I've never seen BBC giving
Tausifur Rahman.
Sir, you are telling this that this is the kind of story which has been recreated.
Of Hindus? Has BBC
is this a story which is recreated? All those people who have died, all those who murdered, who have lost their son, those pregnant women from all the communities, they have lost their life. You think it's a story which has been recreated? This is a movie which is called Karma or Reincarnation. Sir, you can't be so harsh. This book is something which is coming out to be a truth.
You can't be so harsh.
You can go and ask those people who have suffered in Gujarat riot, whether they are Christians, Muslims or Hindus. Everyone has lost their life.
Single report on
and some people are telling, and I've heard.
Yes.
Some people are saying that just because Narendra Modi is the biggest prime minister and the best prime minister in the world, that's why they want to malign his image.
Single reportage, single interview, single documentary.
Sir, at least don't use such words where you're saying it's been recreated. Gujarat riot is not a myth.
Okay. Let's now talk about facts. Tausifur Rahman, first of all, let's be clear that this documentary is not about the riots. This documentary is about Mr. Modi being responsible for the riots. And on that singular question, let's be very clear about it. This does not say 2002 riots. This documentary, Tausifur Rahman, is India, the Modi question. And I can tell you this as somebody who's watched the whole thing, that it basically says the riots happened and Modi was responsible for it, actively abetted it, and even told people to go out and kill. Now that one premise has been singularly debunked by the Supreme Court of India. Then how are they making this assumption based on old facts which stand debunked, Mr. Rahman?
Padmaja, this is very straight. I understand this documentary is all about involvement of Modi. They are claiming, I understand. They have claimed this and they have narrated the whole story.
That is why it has been called out as agenda-driven propaganda. Because how are you calling it Modi's responsibility when the Supreme Court of India is saying that he had nothing to do with it?
I support this documentary. I have to support this documentary. And all the Indians who have lost their lives in 2002 Gujarat riot, they need to see this documentary.
You have to support the documentary which is not based on fact.
Tell me something. Why it has been banned?
Okay, you're saying I have to support it. Now I'm curious. And Rashmi Samant and Sushil Pandit will both listen to you. You're saying I have to support it. Why do you have to support it irrespective of fact?
Why not? You really think the current Prime Minister was not involved?
It doesn't matter.
I understand.
I'm
not going against the Supreme Court.
What matters is the Supreme Court of India thinks. And last I was told that the Supreme Court of India is independent right now only because the NJAC has been struck down. So NJAC is being opposed on the basis that Supreme Court is independent only because of NJAC not being there. So when this independent Supreme Court of India has said that Mr. Modi had nothing to do with it, then why would you want this documentary which contradicts that order to be watched and believed?
Then why? Okay, fine. If the current Prime Minister is totally clean, he's coming out of clean, and the Supreme Court also declared that he's clean, why BJP is scared now?
Why should anyone be scared? Rashmi Samant. Stories must be told, facts or no facts, order or no order. These are stories. Rashmi Samant, why would you have a problem?
I mean, what kind of a panelist you have?
There was a smear campaign and there was consistent misinformation being spread about the Hindu community, and that translated to on-street violence. We know for a fact that mistruths have a real-time impact.
Okay, I think there's some audio issue with you, Rashmi. I think there's an audio issue. Sushil Pandit, if you could please take that question, then I'll go to Sumansi Raman. Yes. Sushil Pandit, these are just stories. You have your side. BBC has its own side. Let all stories be told.
You know, there was a time for all the stories being told and heard. When the matter has been finally settled, after successive SITs, after so many probes, Supreme Court saw this matter, heard this matter over more than half a dozen different CJIs. Different judges heard this. Different arguments happened. You know, all the courts looked at it, from the trial courts in Gujarat, then in Maharashtra to SITs. Supreme Court appointed amicus curiae, all of them did this, and then they arrive at a conclusion. Once this was done, yes, this is a documentary. When you try and resurrect the ghosts, reinvent these ghosts of the past in an election year,
and who are
1 year down the line, we will be choosing a new government. 20 years later, what is the relevance of this documentary?
Sir,
except that intervenes in our domestic
you are sitting on a national television on Times now. Are you pointing out those people who lost their life?
Exactly are we accusing in the BBC of being biased or having an agenda? Is it the directors of BBC? Is it the British government indirectly through the BBC? Who exactly? Look, this is a documentary which at least apparently does not seem to say anything that dramatically new in terms of any evidence than what we already knew. So from that perspective, I think what is the logic in giving this documentary nationwide attention and saying that, BBC is biased and so on? Now, we have to, if a charge is being made, it should be made against some individual. BBC is an organization. Now, the organization
Who do you have a
itself
problem with?
having-
Rashmi Samant. Okay.
Is
Rashmi
it the
Samant,
British
who do you have a
government?
problem with? Who are you accusing of bias?
Well, I think the problem I have is with misinformation, is with this repeated, pushing of propaganda without any legislative proof, because it does have real-time effect. We are scared of this because in Leicester, when mistruth was spread about the Hindu community, it translated to on-street violence against the Hindus. That is what I'm scared about, because the misinformation, the false propaganda, the moment we stop paying it heed, it turns into something bigger. And, there have been reports, the Simpson report, the Simpson Center report clearly shows that...
Who is doing this, madam?
That
You're not
this
answering
kind
the
of
question.
swarming...
Yes, let her finish. Please, let her finish. And you heard that, Dr. Sumansi Raman. Dr. Sumansi Raman, it is disinformation that has real-life ramifications.
It has, I know the victims of this misinformation, this kind of misinformation.
Answer Mr. Raman's question.
Who is the person or persons with the agenda, madam? Are you accusing
Who's the person
British
with the
government?
agenda? Sushil Pandit, who's the person with the agenda?
I will tell you.
Let's clarify this. Who's the person with the agenda? Sushil Pandit.
Yes. Mr. Raman, yes. So British government is not to be blamed because BBC enjoys real autonomy there. BBC is independent of the government. 2, BBC is culpable. BBC is a delivery system. BBC system has looked at this documentary and found it fit despite huge legal evidence, cases, and their conclusions and judgments to allow it on air, which is disparaging a sitting prime minister and elected prime minister of a country.
BBC,
and
that is your
those
answer.
who have built this,
Dr.
made this
Sumansi Raman.
documentary.
No, my problem, Padmaja, is yes,
those who have created this documentary.
Elected prime minister cannot go wrong ever in his life.
1 minute. This may be motivated. It may be a hit job. But if we are making a charge, you should make it against an individual or a group of individuals. BBC is an organization. Are you saying that the program producer is the person with the agenda? The directors of BBC are the person with the agenda.
What are these tangential arguments that you always come up with?
That is important to know,
Yes,
right?
imagine.
I mean, here we are discussing that
It's a
there
delivery
is a
system.
large-scale
BBC
attempt.
is a powerful network.
It is basically a network. Tawseefur Rahman, a network, and it's always, by the way, it's always a set of individuals who seem to be recurring. The same set of individuals who, by the way, have various legal problems of their own right now in India. You've got Amnesty, which has been acted against by the government. The head of Amnesty is being quoted there as a sort of witness to say that Mr. Modi is irresponsible, the Supreme Court verdict be damned. Then you've got another person who at one point of time had justified left-wing extremism as Gandhis with guns. She has been taken as a witness to how Mr. Modi oversaw a large-scale pogrom. It has been called ethnic cleansing, despite the fact, Tawseefur Rahman, that not only were Hindus murdered in the Godhra train burning, but there were Hindu victims of this riots as well. That is why it is being called out as agenda. Tawseefur Rahman.
This is the problem I want to explain in simple words. That again I am telling you that Narendra Modi has got clearance from all the agencies, from Supreme Court as well. Now, another honorable panelist said that BBC is a very strong network and they are very important in London as well, and they are private as well. But now the thing is that it's a simple documentary. It stands nowhere. It's a recreation. Okay, it's been recreated again. This whole it's a berserk or whatsoever you want to say. What is the problem? Let it get released.
Here is the problem. Here is the problem.
Where is the
because
problem?
This documentary is not just a 90-minute or a 60-minute piece of work. Do you know, sir, that this documentary subsequently was raised in the British Parliament? And what did the Member of Parliament say? He says that large-scale genocide of Muslims is being carried out. Now, that is a matter of parliamentary record in the UK. Based on what? This harmless documentary, sir, that you say everyone should watch and everyone should propagate. Anyhow,
Why not?
we
It's
are
not about-
going
it's not
to,
about
in the
everyone
next
should
3
propagate,
hours,
but everyone
get you more facts and actual people who have participated in the documentary and who are now going to call it out for why they think it's a hatchet job. Thanks very much, all gentlemen and Rashmi Samant, for joining me. I'll see you next at 10 on the News Hour Agenda.